no previous minutes to, is there?
No, this is a special meeting
Just a special
of the
meeting.
Board of Trustees. The only thing on the agenda is the 2018 budget, right? And our meeting last week, you guys had, remember we had talked about, did you want to hold the meeting this week? Because we were pretty close to approving everything, but there were still a couple of questions that were sort of hanging out there. So we decided to hold the meeting this week as a special meeting just to go over the budget one more time. And I'm glad that you made that decision because unfortunately we did have to make some changes yesterday to one of the funds, which I'll go over with you guys. So I guess we'll just hop right into it then.
Yep.
I'm not expecting
Line and sinker.
anyone else. So I've put together another memo to you guys summarizing the status of where each budget is right now. And I believe Joanne has some new drafts to hand out to you guys. Yeah, okay, so you guys should have those new drafts in front of you for all of the departments. And
Everything?
yeah, that's everything as it stands. So I've done a summary for each of the departments that we will go through then, and we can take as much or as little time as you guys want to on these. We may have one executive session item if you guys would like to go into executive session at the end of these discussions. There might be one reason to do that. So without further ado, why don't we get into it? So in the general fund, after all the changes from our meeting last week, which were essentially removing the Pleasant Street project, removing the 16 Village Drive roof replacement project, the village tax rate now, as it is currently showing, is 0.582 cents. So you got to move the decimal, so it's 58.2 cents. That's up from 2017's tax rate of 0.5558, or a 4.72% increase on the tax rate, and that's where you guys left it last week with us. There was one other thing that we had talked about, but you guys decided to keep it at 5 years, which was maybe changing the Elm Street sidewalk project loan from 5 years to 10 years to see if we could shave a little bit more off the tax rate with that, but you decided to leave that at 5 years. So as it's showing right now, that is the tax rate. It's a 4.72% increase from last year, and it would be 58.2 cents. The main reasons for the increase in the budget I've listed below, where I talk about the tax rate there in the memo summary. So those reasons would be the Elm Street sidewalk project, the sidewalk appropriation going back to $25,000 from $5,000. Recall last year in 17 we actually decreased the sidewalk appropriation to $5,000 from the normal $25,000 because you guys were concerned about the tax rate, wanted to keep it as low as we could, and the only thing we really needed to raise sidewalk funds for was the match on the engineering portion of the Elm Street sidewalk project, and we could do that with $5,000. So that was a decision that was made in 17 to lower that from 25 to 5. But now this year we've put it back up again to 25. The Hayes Farm Road culvert project, the purchase of a new street sweeper, the Better Connections grant match, and then the new Lake Champlain phosphorus cleanup municipal road tax, which isn't a lot, but it's about $3,000 and added into the general fund. That's a new tax that municipalities that are within the Lake Champlain watershed area are being forced to pay to our state government to support phosphorus cleanup efforts in Lake Champlain. So it's not a one-time thing, it's something we're gonna have to pay every year going forward, for as long as anybody can foresee anyway, because it will certainly take decades to clean that lake up if it's possible to do it to the levels that the EPA is saying they're requiring it to be cleaned up. So that's where general fund stands. Water department, as was discussed, I guess it was 2 meetings ago, the last time we went through the water department, and board had given your approval to the department at that meeting. Water department will be running at a loss for 2018 of $15,523. The deficit will be covered by use of available funds in the department, thereby avoiding a rate increase for 2018. But you know, as I normally say, when we take those kinds of measures, the board may want to consider a rate increase in 2019, the following year, if the budget shows a similar loss in that next year. So it's something to consider, but I feel perfectly comfortable covering the deficit in the water department with available funds in that department for 2018 and avoiding a rate increase in that way. Wastewater department is where we've discovered another issue yesterday morning. So after some additional concerns were raised by Brian Ovitt, our chief operator at the wastewater plant, we held a staff meeting yesterday morning to review the items that Brian had brought to our attention. And it was 2 things. I've listed them down in bullet points there. First was under the revenues side of the wastewater department, the job merchant contract line item. So if you go in your drafts, you'll see that's highlighted in your drafts, but it's the job merchant contract line item under revenues. And Brian correctly pointed out that this line item appeared to be greatly inflated. After discussion, we realized he was right. That line item should not be anything close to what it was showing in the draft budget. We discussed it for a bit yesterday morning, and staff recommendation is that we should decrease that line item from the approximately $46,000 it's showing in the previous draft down to $3,000, and that's what it is showing in your current draft in front of you. So that was one issue that we discovered. The second was, and this wasn't a mistake, it was information that was unknown to us until Friday of last week. Brian got in touch with me and said he got contacted by our state wastewater inspector, and this person informed Brian that there are going to be a couple new mandated requirements that the State Division for Wastewater Management is going to make of our wastewater department in 2018. One of them will apparently be ongoing, and that is they are requiring additional water quality testing of the facility to try and, I guess in their eyes, have more accountability for what's going into the Missisquoi River and therefore what potentially is going into Lake Champlain. And there will be some additional expenses to do these tests, and Brian's estimate is it will be an additional approximately $2,000 to do those additional water quality tests. The second item is the state informed Brian that they are also going to request a 20-year analysis of our wastewater facility in 2018, and that will need to be done by our engineers for our wastewater system. So Brian contacted Aldrich and Elliott engineers, spoke with Wayne Elliott about what the cost would be to have them go in and do this 20-year analysis to provide to the state. And Wayne told Brian it would be $2,000 for them to come in and do that analysis and write it up and provide the report to the state for them. So that was an additional cost. So the two of those together then are an additional $4,000 in the expense section of the department. So with these new discoveries, what staff's recommending is under the highlighted section there. So we're recommending revenues decrease in the job merchant contract line item to $3,000. We are recommending decreasing the accrued time line item, so that's under expenses, from $30,000 to $25,000. After we discovered, the revenues were going down dramatically, we tried to find some areas we could cut in. That was really the only place we could find left to go back to and make any worthwhile cuts. But I think we're still okay with that. So we do reduce that line item by $5,000. But I think we're okay. I think we should still be all right with that. And then increase, as I just went over, the engineering line item by $2,000 to cover the 20-year analysis that Aldrich and Elliott Engineering will be doing for us, and then to increase the treatment supplies and testing line item by $2,000 to cover the additional water quality testing the state is asking for. So the net effect of all of these changes is that rather than showing the wastewater budget as a $4,276 excess revenues over expenditures, which is what we had last discussed and you guys had given approval to for the wastewater department budget, we're now showing a $38,118 deficit in the department for 2018. So this is due obviously mainly to the loss in revenue that from the correction we had to make on the job merchant contract line item. But it's the right thing to do, even though it was very disappointing to discover this. There is time to still correct the budget and present accurate figures to the public on that. So I do think now that we have detected that error in the revenue line item, we should take the step to correct it, revise it to what it should be, and move forward from there. So as I said, we would be showing a $38,118 deficit in the wastewater department for 2018. Staff's recommendation is to use available funds in the department to bridge that deficit, thereby avoiding a rate increase in 2018, but again, make the statement that the board may want to consider doing a rate increase in 2019 if the budget shows a similar loss that next year. But I feel perfectly comfortable covering that deficit with available funds in the wastewater department for 2018. I don't have the December financial statements, but in the end of November, we were showing $390,888.47 in available funds in the wastewater department. That's a healthy balance in our available funds, and I feel perfectly comfortable taking the $38,000 out to cover the deficit in the 2018 budget with that.
So originally we chopped it 47,000, didn't we?
Yeah, and we got it down to, we were actually showing a small revenues
That
over.
47,000 brought it down with a small surplus, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys had given your approval to that department at that point. But then yesterday morning, Ryan informed us about these two things that had come to light, both the additional request from the state on the expense side of the department, which was relatively minor.
$4,000.
Right. But then also the bigger issue in the revenue side, and that's what's creating the deficit. But that is staff's recommendation to address that issue in the wastewater department. And although it's not ideal, I feel comfortable in doing that for 2018.
So we're taking the 38,000 out of this account.
Yeah, available funds
Yeah.
to offset the deficit. Are there any questions so far on any of that? Okay. So then our last fund is the electric department. We have not made any changes from last meeting. At the conclusion of our board meeting last week, there were no changes made. We're currently showing a deficit in the electric department of $12,826. The board agreed that this would be bridged by available funds in the department for 2018, which I, again, feel perfectly comfortable with. We have a healthy fund balance in the electric department. We should be able to cover that deficit of $12,000 in there. But there is one remaining question in the electric department, which the board may want to discuss. It has to do with reducing the Franklin Foods EDA credit, and that was never resolved at last meeting. So I'll leave that up to you as to whether you may want to do that in another section of the meeting. But that may be something we still want to talk about tonight.
On the electric side, is there any, how's this not producing any electricity? Is that going to affect our income? And I'm sure it has, or it's going to.
The fact that we're not generating electricity.
Is that accounted for? Or
Yes.
in here?
Yeah, it's in your power supply figures. Yeah. And definitely, you know, one of the reasons why power supply costs are up a bit this year, because we're having to buy more electricity out of the market to cover the lost generation that we're expecting to have through 2018 with our hydro facilities down.
The energy cost has increased in the past month. That must affect our purchase power, I would imagine.
Yeah, it fluctuates.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's actually an hourly market, believe it or not, even in,
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty wild what our personnel down at Vermont Public Power Supply Authority can get into it at sometimes, you know, I mean, it can be that tight if you need it to be, if a customer needs it to be. There's actually an hourly market that, you know, they can go in and bid on.
oh, yeah,
So,
Interesting.
yep.
so, that's, you know, that in a nutshell, that's where everything stands in all of our funds. Happy to answer any questions if we can, or if the board has any at this time. If you are happy with these funds, or maybe not happy, but accepting of the funds and approve them, then we'll get to work on finishing them and getting them ready to go into the annual report.
What do you need from us?
So we would need a motion. There may be one item still, as I mentioned, under electric that the board may want to talk about, but we may want to go into executive
I
session.
think we should go into executive session on that, should we?
Well, you need a motion on what we just talked about, the changes in the budget.
Yeah, if you want to do 3 of them, general fund, water and wastewater, you could make a motion to approve those funds.
I'll make
And
the
then-
motion.
Okay,
Second,
I'll second that.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the only thing left now is the electric fund.
Yep,
yeah.
yeah.
So before, I assume we're gonna go into executive
Yep.
session.
Yeah.
Before we do that, just one item I wanted to make the board aware of since we were meeting tonight, and that is that we've got a significant water leak. It took us about 2 weeks to chase it down, but we're losing about 100,000 gallons a day on this water leak. And Gary Denton has had 2 different companies come in to do testing in various parts of the village. We couldn't find the leak. Something that large, you'd think,
Yeah.
you know, would start squirting out of the street somewhere, but it hasn't. So after about 2 weeks of testing in different parts of the village, we now believe we've identified where the leak is. Unfortunately, it's in a pretty bad location to have something like that. It's right in the middle of Main Street, kind of on the corner of Main Street and Missisquoi Street. And so that's not a great location to have, you know, a major water leak like that. It looks like probably Thursday.
You mean right next to the park?
Yeah, but it's in the street. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not, you know, on the sidewalk or anything. It's in Main Street. But it is off to one lane, one side of the lane. So we believe when we go in for repairs, we'll be able to keep one lane of traffic running down Main Street. We're not going to have to completely close it off. It looks like probably this Thursday we're going to go in and do this. I've been talking with Gary for the last few days about, you know, all the different variables surrounding this. You know, obviously we don't want to, you know, create as big a disruption as possible. We want to keep the disruptions to the businesses on Main Street at a minimum. But there's no other way around it. We are going to have to, you know, shut the water off. We are going to have to dig up a section of Main Street to get in there to find exactly where the leak is and repair it. And then we'll have to come back in and, close everything up, put some cold patch over. That's all we can do right now is put cold patch on, but then we'll come back in the spring and, and repave it, make it look better. And it looks like we're gonna do that on Thursday. We'll start about 7 a.m. Gary thinks he can finish it in about 4 hours, he thinks, but it's kind of hard to say exactly because it's underground. And so we don't know exactly what we're dealing with until we actually find it.
You're gonna have to shut the water off.
We are gonna have to shut the water off.
Quite an area, probably.
Pardon?
For quite an area, because it's...
Well, not in terms of the village, but it's gonna be essentially from the intersection of Bismarck Street in Maine down to the intersection of School Street in Maine.
That ain't too bad.
No, but it's,
Oh, yeah.
it's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 4 buildings it'll affect. And it's right in the middle of
Yeah.
downtown, so I'm sure nobody will be happy about that. We're not happy
No.
about it either, but we can't.
What about the apartments, John? Won't affect the apartment?
Yeah, well,
It will affect the apartment.
yeah, the Falls
Yeah,
building, the newer building downtown will be without water for a period. It's not gonna be all day or anything. Like I said, Gary thinks if all goes well, he can do it in about 4 hours. And if it's a clean break, he may be able to get the water back on in about an hour. And then the rest of it would be, the cleanup work, filling it in, getting the cold patch on, and managing traffic. But there will be no water for at least some period of that morning to those buildings.
They'll just have to do the best they can.
Yeah.
I can't do any
Part of
more.
the business.
Where can that water be going to lose that much?
Well, we caught a little bit of a break in that there's a catch basin right next to where that line is. And so it appears that water, and that's why it hasn't been shooting out of the ground somewhere or, creating a giant sinkhole in the middle of Main Street, is the water has actually been leaking right into the catch basin. So draining out in through the catch basin line. And so that's actually a little bit of a break that we got, at least in that.
That building starts tipping there, Champlain.
Right.
We'll know we have a problem.
Right. Yeah, but it's not, unfortunately, with a leak that size, it's not something we can just, put off to the spring or something. We've got to get it repaired, and it looks like Thursday is probably going to be our best shot. It's going to be the warmest day this week. It's supposed to be like 37.
So is there anything else to cover before we go into executive session? Or what do you have, Guy?
We're ready for executive session.
Oh, okay. I'll accept the
I make the motion, we go into
executive.
executive session.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No motion?